The Third Crusade, the epic saga of kings, storms, and fate 1189 to 1192 as the sun rose in the east. The call to prayer echoed from the towers of Jerusalem. On the morning of the 2nd of October 1187, Saladin had received the keys to the Holy City. The heart of the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem had stopped beating. On the blood-soaked plains of Haddon, swords were shattered, the true cross was lost. King Guy was taken prisoner, and Renaud de Chatillon's head was severed by Saladin's own blade. When the news reached Europe, church bells tolled in mourning and kings dashed their crowns to the ground, and the world trembled beneath the shadows of three great kings. The March of the Red Beard, the legend of Barbarossa, spring of 1189. Along the banks of the Danube, 100,000 souls gathered. The red-bearded old Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, at the age of 67, donned his armor once more. Beneath the golden cross banner marched German knights, Bavarian archers, Swabian peasants, and Rhenish lords in a single thunderous roar. Deus Vult. When they entered Anatolia, spring was in bloom, but the road was hell itself. The Byzantine Emperor Isaac II Angelos, secretly allied with Saladin, closed the passes. The Crusaders marched hungry, thirsty, and fever-stricken, yet they marched. The 18th of May 1190, before the walls of Konya, the sky thundered, as the Turkmen horsemen of Sultan Kilij Arslan II charged wave after wave. Barbarossa spurred his horse forward and cried, "Today either Konya will be ours, or paradise." The city fell, the Seljuk capital burned. Even Turkish chronicles called him the red-bearded devil. But fate struck its cruelest blow right after victory. The 10th of June 1190, the Geksu-Kalakadnis River, the cold waters roared. The aged emperor dismounted and stepped into the stream, perhaps to cool himself, perhaps to be reborn in baptism. His heavy armor dragged him under. Frederick Barbarossa, commander of the greatest army the world had ever seen, drowned in a shallow river. His host dissolved. Of 100,000, only 5,000 reached Acre, weeping. Even Barbarossa's son, Duke Frederick of Swabia, died on the way. The German epic ended in the cold embrace of a mountain stream. 2. Richard the Lionheart, the storm that came from the sea summer of 1190. Across the Mediterranean, hundreds of ships set sail. King Richard of England, tall, red-haired, eyes like steel, wielding a massive sword, stood at the prow of his flagship. At his side was King Philip II Augustus of France, pale, calculating, and jealous. Richard was unstoppable on the journey. In Cyprus, the tyrannical Byzantine governor Isaac Komnenos rebelled. In 3 weeks Richard conquered the island. He bound Isaac in silver chains, saying, "I promised I would not use iron." The 8th of June 1191, before Acre, the city had been besieged. For 2 years, it was a cauldron of blood and fire. Saladin's green banners flew high while the Crusaders perished of hunger and plague. When Richard stepped ashore, his armor blazed like the sun. Though sick, his hair was falling out. He personally directed the siege engines and hurled stones. The 12th of July 1191, Acre fell. 3 days after the victory, Richard ordered 2,700 Muslim prisoners beheaded before the walls. Saladin watched from afar, grinding his teeth, but his army was shattered. Philip Augustus claimed illness 3 days later, boarded his ship, and returned to France. Blood already ran between him and Richard. Now Richard stood alone, king of the Mediterranean, facing Saladin single-handed. 3. The Lions of Arsuf, the 7th of September 1191. The plain of Arsuf. Saladin's entire host, Turkmen archers, Mamluk cavalry, Arab infantry, encircled Richard's 15,000 men. All day arrows fell like rain. The Crusaders locked their shields and marched in silence. Then Richard sounded the trumpet. The Hospitallers and Templars charged at the gallop. Richard rode at the forefront, swinging his great sword with both hands, roaring "St. George!" As he carved through the Mamluk lines, Saladin's green standard fell. The Muslim army broke and fled. That day Richard truly earned the name Lionheart. I've eat twice at the gates of Jerusalem twice. Richard came within 12 miles of Jerusalem. On the second occasion his men were weeping, "Let us see Jerusalem and die." But Richard turned back. He knew the truth. Even if he took the city, he could not hold it. There were no supplies, no reinforcements. Philip and Duke Leopold of Austria were plotting behind his back. The 2nd of September 1192, at Jaffa, he met Saladin. The two great men shook hands with mutual respect. The treaty: Jerusalem would remain in Muslim hands. Christian pilgrims would be free to visit unarmed. The coastal strip from Tyre to Jaffa would belong to the Crusaders. As Richard boarded his ship he said, "O Jerusalem, I shall see you again either in this world or the next. V homeward bound and captivity. On the return voyage, a storm cast his ship onto the Austrian coast. Duke Leopold of Austria, who had been humiliated by Richard at Acre, had him seized and chained. The Lionheart spent 2 years rotting in German dungeons. When England paid the ransom, the people sang, "Where is our blonde king? Where is our lion?" Upon his release in 1194, Richard's first act was to have Leopold excommunicated. Epilogue of the Saga. Saladin died 6 months after the treaty, in 1193, in Damascus. Richard died in 1199, struck by an ordinary arrow while besieging a minor castle. Barbarossa's body decayed in barrels of vinegar. But what they left behind was legend. 3 kings had set out. 1 drowned in a river. 1 abandoned the race halfway. 1 fought like a lion yet never took the holy city. Nevertheless, the Third Crusade remains the most glorious, most tragic, and most human epic in history. It contains everything: heroism, betrayal, love, hatred, victory, and above all the profound respect between 2 giants. When Richard died, his last words were, "Give my greetings to Saladin. He was greater than I." And in Damascus, on Saladin's tomb, it is still written, "Your victory was won not by the sword, but by mercy."